Dr. Carol Swain, you are legendary. Your
Oh,
story is so amazing. I mean it. And I'm not even going to try to do a recap of your story because I want to get to your book, The Gay Affair, which is so fun, the name. And it's I think an important book for our time because academia, the Ivy League, and the corruption and all the rest that is endemic now with our higher education system is crucial. And you are a superb spokesperson if, in all things regarding higher education. But first, your personal story is amazing to me. And I will call it sort of my modern day Abraham Lincoln story because when I think of Abraham Lincoln growing up in the impoverishment that was so common, people were poor and in those days, and he grew up in this little cabin. I can't remember if he had a wood floor or just a dirt floor. I don't remember, but he made something of himself, didn't he? And he read books, as far as I understand it. And my grandparents came here on a wagon train in probably 1902, something like that, from Ireland, potato famines or something. And they had 11, 12 kids, grew up in a sod house in the Dakotas, literally
wow.
built in the side of a hill. And I used to have a picture of it, and it's lost now, but just covered with sod. 11, 12 kids. They grew up to be teachers, not PhDs and not
Uh-huh.
at the Ivy League. But your story is so inspiring because I don't know if you call it rags to riches, but it embodies the American dream and hope. So
I agree.
start from the beginning.
Well, let me tell you that my story is not a Black story. I see it as an American story. And when I think about my life, the messages I received as a child, you can call it indoctrination, but I believed I lived in the greatest country in the world. The messages I received was that if you worked hard and got an education, you could make something out of yourself. And it was not about someone else taking you and trying to make something out of you. It was you can make something out of yourself.
And uh, the missing ingredient of the initiative, the desire, the willingness to put in the hard work. If you're relying upon somebody else to make you something or just explode encouragement, you can be all that you want to be. And, somehow this kind of self-esteem education is really going to put you on the path to success is kind of a mirage or a fantasy, isn't it?
I would agree. And
I mean, I'm not saying encouragement is not important. What I'm saying is nobody can make you successful. You have to actually, with that encouragement, do the hard work.
yes, and I would say that a lot of us are wired differently. I was one of 12 children born and raised in rural poverty in southwestern Virginia. Of the 12, we all dropped out of school after completing the eighth grade. Three of us have high school equivalencies. I think a couple may have taken a course or two in a community college, but I'm the only one who has college degrees. And I can say that based on my mother and based upon what I know, I was different and more serious than my siblings, and I had a sense of urgency as a child, just very, very serious. And I believe that God is a factor in our stories, and that there are people that He selects and steers, and maybe it's just people who listen. But for some reason, my experience has been very different from my siblings.
It's interesting because, and I do want to talk about what it was like to grow up, and you lived in a small home. You didn't have indoor plumbing, did you?
It was a two-room shack for the early part of my life. And my older sister and I, and the first born children, slept on the kitchen floor. And then my stepfather, go ahead.
No.
My,
Go
s-
ahead.
my stepfather later built 2 rooms on the back of the house, and that was one room for him and my mother, and the other room for the children. And we had 2 beds, one for the girls and one for the boys. And so all the girls, there were 5 girls and 7 boys, but not all the children were born at the same time. So that shack probably never held more than 9 people at one time.
That's all. Just 9 people. You know, but one thing about your story, growing up in a 2-room shack with some additions built by your dad, and I'm sure that the building regulations were not prohibitive in that he was able to build it. Today, you probably, most people couldn't because of building codes, but you had 11 siblings and yourself growing up with the same parents, the
Well,
same.
not same parents, not same parents.
Okay.
And I want to tell you about those 2 rooms that my stepfather built on the back of the house. And as an adult, I've been back to that house shack, and the first 2 rooms were well built. They're still standing. And I'm always struck by just how tiny the whole structure was. And it had cardboard paper with wallpaper on top of it on the walls. And it had a tin roof. And the flooring and stuff like that, well built. But my stepfather's 2 rooms that were built on the back in the 1960s, they have fallen off and become rubble. So he was no carpenter.
Luckily, they didn't have the army of regulators and inspectors in your day. Otherwise, you'd have to have stayed in those 2 rooms. Um, do you, isn't it interesting that your story of your family, um, the diversity of outcomes of each one of your siblings, you grew up not necessarily with the same father, of course, which you just corrected me on, but in the same family, in the same home. Mom taught you relatively the same. I mean, it's the same ethic that was behind your
Well,
raising, but
I don't
some.
know. Let me say this. There are people that tell me, because I went through survivor's guilt in my early 20s, maybe going into my 30s, I had a lot of guilt because I couldn't understand why my life was always better than my sibling. Even when I married at 16 and had my first child at 17, I was buying a brand new house. And it was like, it was because of a government program, but it seemed as if things always broke my way. But I would say that my mother and father divorced when I was so young. I don't remember them living together. So 3 of us are by my father, whose last name was Payne. And then there are several kids whose last name was my mother's, the stepfather. And then there were 2 after the stepfather and my mother divorced by someone else. And I would say that my older sister, maybe we benefited by being the oldest children. She was supposed to be a genius, according to her own account. Like, can't independently verify this, but she claimed that all the teachers said she was a genius. I don't ever remember them saying that about me. She also said that they said she was the prettiest girl. But I was always in her shadow, and I always felt like that I was going to outdo her, which I did. She would tell the story of, she looked around at our poverty and she said, well, this is how we were born. This is our lot. This is the way it's got to be. And I never bought into that. And even when I was a teenager, early teens, probably 13, I had an article, a letter published in the local newspaper. And then later in the community college, I had an op-ed in the state newspaper. But I was always not fitting in, always fighting things. And I don't know. I always had a sense of urgency. I felt like there was something I was supposed to do, and I had this uneasy tension. And I've always been swimming upstream and I've never fit anywhere. I didn't fit into my family. As a child, I watched them. It was like I was a distant observer. I thought they were strange. Maybe I was afraid of them because I was terribly shy. I used to hide and peep out from behind furniture. So I was an oddball.
But what I'm trying to understand is this. We have a Marxist ideology that is attempting to irrevocably change our way of life and our country. And much of that is, or part of it, is based on this idea of an equality of outcome, not opportunity. And so as I got to know your story, what kept coming back to me is this question or idea. And that is, here you've got a family, just like with my grandpa, Kavanaugh, the Irish, 12 kids in the Dakotas and the grass house. There's 12 kids. They're raised in the same family, let's put it that way. And there's every one of them, despite getting pretty much the same opportunities, took different paths and had different strengths, and it led to a variety of outcomes. And not that the majority became PhDs, Harvard grads, and, influencers or whatever. One out of your family reached that height. So isn't it an anecdotal evidence of how there will never be perfect equality in outcome? All we can do is give everybody the same shot. And then your sister, who was the pretty one, and you're so gorgeous, she was the beautiful one. She was the genius, but she had a mindset, which you just told me, which I hadn't heard before, that, this was our lot. This is where we're going to be. And you were always like, the kicking at the pricks or whatever Paul said. So is that kind of an example, or am I just off base there of this idea of equality of outcome is clearly not a legitimate approach to how we encourage and structure our society around, say, for instance, affirmative action?
I can tell you that the Marxist ideas I didn't really encounter until I got to graduate school. And there I learned that I was Black, I was poor, I was a mother, a woman. I was a single mother part of that time. And according to their theories, I was not supposed to have accomplished the things that I had accomplished because I was an honest student. As an undergraduate, I graduated magna cum laude while working full-time, 40 hours a week, nights and weekends at the community college library. And I wanted to excel. I thought I was good and I wanted to prove it. That's a personality kind of thing. And I believe that a lot of what made me different from my siblings is that I was just wired differently. And that propelled me. And I've always been a thinker and I'm always questioning things. And some people might say, oh, I'm controversial, that I might be, trying to rile people up when I post on social media. But it really isn't that I wake up in the morning and I think about, well, what can I do to rile people today? I can put out something that I think because they listen, question or comment, and people get riled up. But that's the way it's always been. And I don't know, I've always been swimming upstream.
Well, let's go back to your story. So you're one of 12. You have a broken family. I came from a family with divorce. That can be very difficult. And
And alcoholism.
Oh, there you go. I had that
My
in
mother was an alcoholic.
I had some of that in some of my great aunts and uncles. But so you had that, and you 2-room shack with some additions, and you married at 16 and had children immediately. Tell me the rest of the story, how you went from there, how you got encouragement from your professor and others, and how you went back to school and became the academic success and thought leader that you are.
I can tell this story very quickly. There's probably a 3-minute version of it. Is that I married at 16, had my first child at 17. By the time I was 21, I had 3 small children, and I ended up 1975 turning point year. That year, I got my high school equivalency. I ended up filing for divorce. I took a job outside the home. And the following year, I started the community college. And my goal was just to be able to get a good job because I had worked dead-end jobs. I worked in a garment factory. I've sold things from door to door. I've been a sales clerk. I worked in fast food for half a day. And so I've had all kinds of dead-end jobs. And but at the community college, I was not putting forth a lot of effort and I was making C's. And then after the first year, I wondered what would happen if I studied. And I started studying and I made the dean's list, a couple of times. And I finished my 2-year degree in business, even though I wanted to do art. I'm creative. In elementary school, I won some blue ribbons and I take art classes from time to time. I wanted to be a commercial artist. I was told to be practical. One factor in my success has always been when authority figures told me what I needed to do to be successful, I just followed their advice. So when I was told that commercial art was not very practical for me, I chose business, even though I was not strong in math. I had to take remedial math at the community college. And had I not gone to that community college and met people and been encouraged and been successful, I would not have, eventually applied to a four-year college. And then the master's, I have a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree in criminal justice, 2 political science degrees. One is a master's, one's a PhD, and I have a master's in law from Yale that I got in 2000. And those degrees, that's not something I set out to do. It's like, yeah, one degree led to another, but I can tell you the reasoning behind each degree. I never expected to become a university professor. I was painfully shy. And and the reason I ended up in graduate school in the PhD program was that I applied for jobs during the recession of the 1980s. I was an honest student, well known in the community. I could not find a job that I wanted. And so I applied to graduate school, and the rest is history.
Carol, you are a slap in the face to everybody out there who wants. I mean, the list is so long of the ideologies of wokeism, CRT, Marxism, et cetera. So I'm not going to list them all. You can tell us where all that comes in, but you are a slap in the face. It's an insult to people like Claudine Gay or to any race activist, it's out there trying to wanting discrimination against Asians and Jews because treating them as if they're part of white America and the majority, and putting students that do not really have the qualifications into places like Harvard where they can't succeed, set them up for failure. There's so many things that your story debunks. And I can imagine why people are offended by you.
Well, let me tell you something that when I was in graduate school and undergrad, I was very focused. Like Ronald College in Salem, Virginia is where I got my bachelor's degree. I majored in criminal justice. I won the Criminal Justice Prize, highest GPA. And it was at Ronald College where I experienced a lot of success because I'd be in those huge psychology classes, would be the only Black in the class and make the highest score. These were like multiple choice exams. And I either knew the answers or I didn't. I could finish one of those 100-question quizzes probably in 10 minutes and it would be right. And so I gained a lot of confidence in my abilities while I was at Ronald College. And I thought I would, I was not involved in the Black Student Union. I was only involved in the honor societies because my sole focus was in proving myself, but also in doing what I needed to do to get a job because I had children at the time. I was in a bad marriage. And so I was single-mindedly focused on what I needed to do to be successful. And then later, when I became a graduate student in political science, again, I was very focused on finishing my dissertation and meeting the standards. And the standards at that time was you had to have path-breaking original research to get your PhD. And my dissertation, which became the backbone of my first book, Black Faces, Black Interests, the Representation of African Americans in Congress, it had National Science Foundation funding of $11,000. This was back in the 1980s. That was a lot of money. It was not easy, for a student to get it. And by the time I was finishing my dissertation, I had a Harvard University Press contract on a book. And so that book that came out of that project is what Claudine Gay
Is that
used.
the one okay, we're going to have to jump forward to Claudine Gay because your book, The Gay Affair, is it's the genesis of it, in a sense, is those the congressional hearings with Claudine Gay as president of Harvard and MIT, and was at Penn State, 3 presidents or deans of colleges that gave their testimony about anti-Semitism and all of that was going on campus. And the United States, the American people were shocked by that testimony, particularly Claudine Gay, but all of them. And so that put her into a spotlight because we were all so horrified. And there's this big revelation. Claudine Gay is a serial plagiarist. And she's president of Harvard. So just walk me through. Oh, and by the way, you're the victim of her plagiarism or greatly thereof. There are others that have also been plagiarized.
Right. But I also want to say that when I was in college and getting my PhDs, I was not interested in Marxism. And so I never got caught up in the victimology. And while I was at Roanoke College getting my bachelor's degree, I took a number of courses with a professor, Dr. Bill Hill, who turns out he was a Republican, but he exposed me to conservative ideas like Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, Glenn Loury, and he was not pushing, it was balanced. But I got exposed to conservative ideas. And I was a Democrat at the time, Democrat most of my life, but I'm sure that it impacted my thinking. And so when I left Roanoke College and went to UNC Chapel Hill and took the position at Princeton on the faculty, I was not steeped in Marxism. I very much wanted to be recognized as a congressional scholar. And I ended up, achieving that and winning prizes. But that was my goal. It was only much later after Obama was elected, and I started seeing how everything was being impacted by critical theory, that I started digging into Marxism. And I was spared that because maybe if I had gone to a different institution, been exposed to Marxism and not Thomas Sowell, who knows what would have happened. So that's an aside. Now I can get
But
to
it's
Claudine.
an important aside, and I will just underscore, it's such an important aside because often we wonder, what can we do? And one of the things that we can do is just keep putting the good stuff. Thomas Sowell, a hero. I'm trying to get him, but he hardly does any interviews anymore. Walter Williams. There's so many great thinkers, and they don't have to be Black to put it in this this context, but to getting those ideas and truths out there and speaking about it. We don't know who we're affecting. We don't know what one post on X linked to some great chapter summary or whatever, some book on Amazon, will lead somebody down a road to success and goodness in their life, prosperity. And we don't even know we've caused that. I'm sure you are one of the people that have been very influential with hundreds of people that you have no idea. So that is a very important aside. So go ahead, back to your story with
Well, I
Claudine.
want to say that Nathan Glazer, who was a sociologist at Harvard, I was exposed to his work. Edward Banfield, and so it was not uh, just Black scholars. I was exposed to just a lot of rich literature during my undergraduate days, and I'm sure it impacted my life as a professor, which was not on the part of my plans at the time. Now, fast forward to Princeton. I was tenured early there, and when I was hired, I knew that I would get tenure. Most people don't get tenure. It never crossed my mind that I would not get tenure and that I wouldn't get it early. I had that much, I was going to say arrogance, but self-confidence in my abilities.
That
And I was a hot shot. I had signing bonuses offered to me. I got an offer from every school I interviewed with, except University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And by the time I interviewed there, I already had like 7 or 8 job offers. They knew that I wasn't going to go there, so they didn't extend an offer. And I had an experience there where Black students organized, and they wanted to meet with me. They were not on my schedule, and so I had them adjust the schedule so I could meet with the Black students. And they asked me questions like, if you were to be hired and you came here, how would you treat Black students? Well, the answer was not, I would treat them like everyone else. And they actually took a position against me, the Black students. But it didn't matter. There was no way I was going to University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And the progressive professors did see me as a threat. And I have found in academia the fact that I come from nothing, literally nothing, and my existence defies all of their theories, that it always made them uncomfortable. I had many Black people, and this is the time, and some white progressives, when I was a Democrat, tell me, you don't need to share your story. People don't need to know where you came from. It was like I was an embarrassment to them where I came from, but I was never ashamed of where I came from, but it made them uncomfortable.
Do you think that they're not just embarrassed? I don't know how anybody could be embarrassed by coming up from a 2-room shack with 12 kids. That to me is something to, I'd wear a sign. I grew up in a 2-room shack. Look where I am now. That is not an embarrassment. Isn't it more, it's a threat because of those theories?
Yes.
And, does it tell us, I mean, okay, firstly, I think you and I would
can
agree
see that
on
now. I can see now why my existence made them uncomfortable. And I will tell you something else. During the time I was at Princeton, Clinton was president, and all of the Black colleagues that I knew at Princeton, there wasn't that many Black people there on the faculty, got invited to the Clinton White House, and I didn't. And I think it had to do with, by the time my book, Black Faces, Black Interests, the representation of African Americans, had been published, it was cutting against the grain with its thesis. And I was not included. I didn't get invited. I would have gone.
Well, yeah, but that's pretty normal today too, isn't it? Because you see this sort of canceling and exclusion for anyone who goes against the grain, and you're clearly that person, and so feminists will cancel women, and the LGBTQ blah 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 people will cancel, say, a gay person who's not for transgender men playing in girls' sports. Okay, so they cancel their own. They're really not about, and then the Black race lobby cancels anybody like you who is, especially you offend more than anything because you're Black and you're supposed to be supporting all of their race theories, correct?
But what's interesting is that the arguments that I made in Black Faces, Black Interests, And even my warning about the Republicans taking over the Congress, I was right and I was vindicated. And most of my work has been seen as prescient. I'm usually 5 or 10 years ahead of everyone else, and people who watch my career, read my books, admit this, and some of them are secular humanists, progressives. They acknowledge that I have something that a lot of other people don't, and I think I had the ability to see. Uh, yeah, I have the ability to see, and I don't censor myself. And there may be other people who can see, but they're too afraid to speak the truth.
That is a very good point as well. Why don't we go this direction? Well, I wanted to ask you about tenure. You said it's everybody doesn't get tenure, and I probably should just do my own research. But I've got a woman here who can really give me some insight. Is tenure a problem today? The people that receive tenure, does it give them what proportion of professors receive tenure? Are they deserved? Can you lose tenure? Is it really an important protection for free speech, or is it really just sort of a scam at this point where it's a cover for, indoctrinating and being an activist, indoctrinating professor rather than someone who is teaching students how to think and allowing for diversity of opinion? Tell me more
Well,
about tenure.
I mean, tenure has changed over the years. When I earned, with the emphasis on earned, my early tenure at Princeton, it was very difficult to get tenure, whether you were white or black. And I was the only tenured uh, black professor in the politics department. I believe there was one other, or there had been one in the Woodrow Wilson School. And then later, they have tenured people. The standards are clearly not the same today as they were in the early 1990s when I earned my tenure. You had to have path-breaking work. It had to be independently reviewed. And my book was considered controversial. And there were black scholars that threatened me. There were some white professors. And I remember Harold Shapiro, who was the president of Princeton University, congratulating me and telling me that tenure was developed for people like me. And so it was clear that my thinking outside the box, um, well, I got my tenure, but there were people that were gunning for me because they didn't like those ideas, but the system worked for me. Later, I can tell you that as I uh, matured as a professor and gradually became more conservative. I had a Christian conversion experience. I would argue that tenure protected me up until I decided to take early retirement from Vanderbilt. Because at some point after the election of Barack Obama, I became more and more vocal, more involved in politics outside of academia. I started writing op-eds. I started doing media. I started doing things. And some of the things that I did that actually was a factor in my leaving academia is in 2015, January 15th, 2015, I wrote an article criticizing Islam, and it created a firestorm, not just in Tennessee, was published in the Tennessean, but all across the country. And it brought people together, it divided people, but it put a target on my back. And it was a factor in me eventually leaving academia. But I was doing media at the time. I'd overcome my lifelong shyness, doing a lot of media. Summer of, I believe it was July 2016, I gave an interview on CNN where I criticized Black Lives Matter. I said that they were a Marxist group. I believe I was the first person to say that on TV, and and that they were a destructive force. And I encouraged people to go to their website. I can remember telling people, go to that website, go to that website. That created another firestorm.
So you
And
were that person that got us to go there to find out they wanted to destroy the family and the, oh, Thank you.
I was debating a woman from LA named Ariva Martin. I'm just telling you that right after that, maybe a few days after that, I was traveling and I started getting these messages from people saying, "I'm so sorry about what Vanderbilt did to you." And I mean, what did they do to me? There were press releases that were sent out almost every time I gave an interview saying that I didn't represent Vanderbilt. They stood for free speech and all of this stuff like that. And, oh, I know what happened. Right after I did the CNN interview where I criticized Black Lives Matter, one of my close friends said, "Congratulations, Carol. You finally united the campus." And I go, "What are you talking about?" Well, the after I wrote the piece criticizing Islam, the Muslims and the LGBTQ people were after me, but the blacks stayed out of it. But once I criticized Black Lives Matter, I had the Muslims, the LGBTQ people that I never, ever had a problem with at all. These were not even students in my classes, but they were saying that I was homophobic and I might discriminate against someone that was gay and I might do this and I might do that. And there was a petition, to have me suspended. All kinds of things happened. I made a decision right after that interview and the reaction to it to take early retirement and leave academia. And that's what I did. And I had to reinvent myself. And so I've been out there for 2 years. I didn't know what I was going to do, but gradually I reinvented myself. I'm reaching far more people today than I would have reached if I'd stayed in academia. And I have no regrets about giving up my tenure that I fought so hard to get and walking away from it. And so that was that part of my life. And I was doing fine. And I was happy. And I was working on my memoir, which is the book that everyone wants to read. I was making progress until December 10th, 2023. And that was when I got the phone call asking me if I'd heard about the president of Harvard University, that she had plagiarized her dissertation. And the person who called me said, "And guess who she plagiarized? You."
Was that Arthur
And
Laffer?
yes. You read the book.
Of course I read the book.
Well, some people don't, but at any rate,
I love that guy.
It turned my life upside down, and it's taken me months to get back on track because not only did I go through a range of emotions, with sadness being the most profound initial reaction, I felt very sad for me, and I felt sad for Claudine Gay, and I still feel that she's a victim of circumstances, that she was used the way Black people are used to advance progressive agendas. But sadness turned into anger when Harvard defended her and said that she had not plagiarized, she had engaged in duplicative language without attribution. And then
What
later,
isn't that the definition? Plagiar. Duplicative language. I could write a lot of books if I just used duplicated language without attribution.
well, they seem to have thought that was that and that didn't violate their policies, which it absolutely does. And in the book, I list what their policies are, and there's every reason to believe what they are today, and that they were even more stringent back when she wrote her dissertation. And I went through a lot of anger, which is not natural to me. I'm more happy-go-lucky. I don't get angry, but I got angry. Then I calmed myself down because the Christmas holidays were upon us, just like now, Christmas holidays. I was doing fine. And then she resigned on January 2nd, and she blamed racism. And then Harvard defended her once again, pretty much said she was a great scholar, and they hated to see her step down from the presidency. And that's when I decided that I was going to file a court case against Harvard. I was going to sue Harvard. And I really thought I could raise the money. I did not raise that much money. It would have taken anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 to actually bring a case to trial. And in the book, I talk about the decision-making process and why I decided not to file the lawsuit, which was completed, the complaint, it was ready to be filed. All I needed was to tell my attorneys to pull the trigger. Instead, I decided that it would be better to write a book and to share the legal documents. I don't share the Harvard attorneys' letters in full because under copyright law, they own the copyrights to those letters. So I use excerpts of their letters. And the book, is about Claudine Gay and academia, but it's about more than that. And I believe that plagiarism is a plague that has really diminished the quality of education of our students, and it's eroded academic integrity. And at the roots of everything like this, there is Marxism, because the Marxists don't have any standards. They tear down institutions. They don't build up institutions. And when Harvard University gets behind plagiarism and tries to redefine it, it will impact every educational institution in the country or in the world who look to Harvard
as a
for
standard.
direction. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's sort of like so many of these issues, once you redefine the terms, which Marxists, socialists, revolutionaries of all sorts love to redefine terms. And so we can never even have a conversation where you have to make everybody explicitly define their terms, because are we talking about plagiarism, or are we talking about using similar language without attribution? Which and so they make the conversations very difficult to have. You decided not to sue for the same reason that probably many people do, is that the legal system is a system to impoverish those who are weaker and have less money, less power. And so the wealthy and the powerful can use it very, very well, because it just takes money. But I think, it would have been great if you could have had that lawsuit go forward. And by the way, I'm sure there's no statute of limitations so short that you couldn't, in the future, take it if you did have the funding. I'll call Elon Musk and ask him if he wants to. I'm joking. Anyway.
Well, the interesting thing about it is, had I gone forward, there was an opportunity to maybe redefine copyright law to include cases like mine in academia, because it was clearly not set up for academic plagiarism. So that was one of the benefits that my lawyers saw, but there was that risk that if I went forward and I lost in a loser pays system, I could end up paying Harvard's attorneys out of my retirement and Social Security funds. And when I think about how hard I've worked to be successful, and I have children and great-grandchildren, and I'm trying to, for my great-grandchildren, to help them get a great education, I didn't want to jeopardize their future of fighting
No.
hard.
Well, and there are big issues here that could be addressed outside of the courtroom, though the courtroom has certain benefits, obviously, because money is the great deterrent.
Equalizer.
The great deterrent.
It was a deterrent for me.
Yeah.
And
so
something,
it could be for them
very
if they
hard.
lost. When Trump just won against, I can't remember who was CNN or whom it was, but it was
ABC, I believe.
ABC, $15 million. That's nothing to them, but still, it's $15 million.
Well, Harvard would not even talk with my attorneys, and they said that if I persisted, it would be a frivolous lawsuit, and all these things would happen to me. And their arguments essentially was, ideas are not protected. You can steal ideas. What she took was de minimis, meaning there was not much of it. It was fair use. Now, fair use is normally when you use someone's work or parts of it and you cite it. And then the other part of it was that it would be a frivolous lawsuit if I moved forward. I was willing to move forward until I met with a professor, someone I really respected, who was a third party. He looked at all the documents, and he knows Harvard well, and he said it was too much risk. He thought it was too much risk involved, and he used an analogy that I talk about of Hamas going up against Israel. and Israel pretty much wiping out Gaza, this professor emphasized that you should never go up against a person, an enemy who can wipe you out. And he felt that that's what could happen. Plus, whenever you're involved in a lawsuit, it is draining. It took me away from everything else. And so by using the book route and shifting strategies, I got my life back. Now, I don't know how Harvard is going to react to the book because I'm sure the lawyers thought they had taken care of that little black lady in Tennessee. And then here I come back like a bad penny. Who knows what they'll do, but they were not inclined to do the right thing for sure.
Well, there are different subjects because you explained this all. I think everyone will understand why you didn't sue because some people might say, well, if you were in the right, you would have sued. But we all know that that's not how the legal system works. Not when you're going up against a university with an endowment of what, $1 billion?
50 billion.
Yeah, excuse me, 50 billion. A lot of money. So, Claudine Gay, should she, and then I want to go on to some other subjects, should she lose her position? Why isn't she teaching now ethics at Harvard? And doesn't she make, I don't know, $900,000 a year plus, bennies? But what's her status right now?
Well, here's the thing. And I say this in the book. I don't refer to her as Dr. Gay because in my experience, back in my day, to be called doctor, you had to write and defend a path-breaking dissertation. And you had a committee and it put you through a grinder. And then at the end, after you had successfully defended it, they would feed you wine and cheese and call you doctor, congratulate you. But that was the process. If you have plagiarized your dissertation, and it didn't just involve me, there were 47 instances of plagiarism. I think I read somewhere that it involves 20 people. There were 5 instances of verbatim involved in my work, but more seriously, her whole dissertation was framed around ideas in my prize-winning book. And normally in the social sciences, you do a literature review. You do that when you're writing a thesis or a PhD or even a paper. You're supposed to show that you're familiar with literature. She has no literature reviews where she cites my work and makes it clear why she's doing what she's doing. And it's nothing wrong with challenging someone's work or building on someone's work, but to pretend that they don't exist. And in many ways, I feel like she's a product of her time. She's a product of affirmative action, but also this whole idea that progressives think that if they don't like your ideas and they don't like you, they can pretend that you don't exist. And so her not properly citing my work could have had something to do with ideological differences. So, don't give
Well,
me
she was countering your ideas, right? She was coming out against them, but she wasn't using your
she wasn't saying whose ideas.
But nobody could be sent back. Okay, I read academic works, and some of them are so annoying because literally every phrase has a footnote to it. Some, right?
That's the way the law professors,
that's the way you're supposed to do it, because then if you're so inclined, don't you love to go and look up that footnote? Sometimes there's more good stuff in there than in the book because they had to just throw it all. And then you can say, oh, I want to read that person's work to see how they're countering Carol Swain, Claudine Gayness. So I want to see what Carol said, the whole treatment, and that would have elevated your work. They may have taken it down, but your work is an investment in your career. And she literally just erased that in an area where she was causing controversy. She was contradicting and opposing your ideas, but she wasn't letting anybody know who initiated those ideas. I bet she threw away her book off of her bookshelf. I bet you, after all that, she went and took your book and threw it in the the laundry, I mean, the garbage, so no one would
Well,
find
here's
it
the
on
thing. If she had apologized to me, and some of the scholars that she plagiarized, other scholars, where she took paragraphs and paragraphs, they were people that, some of them, not all of them, but some of them were people that had, uh, that had conducted derivative works of mine. So they may have criticized my work or they may have expanded on my work, but they used my work. They cited me properly. She took paragraphs from those scholars without referencing my work, but they were building on my work. And so there's several people like that. And I
and
know
she
them
also
very
had to
well.
look at the footnotes to know what they were referring to. All right. Claudine Gay should not be called doctor. Should she have a $900,000 plus a year job as a teacher or a professor of ethics at Harvard after she's been let go as the president of Harvard, even though she was the first Black president, first Black or first Black woman president?
First Black president. She's the second female president of Harvard, I believe. But here's the thing is once they give you tenure, it's supposed to be a lifetime appointment that can only be taken away with cause. Like if you violate a law and you commit a felony or something like that, or you do something terrible, you could be stripped of your tenure. It's even worse than that because some of the investigative reporters that I referred to in the book, one of them stated that 8 of her 11 articles have been plagiarized. They have signs of plagiarism in them. 8 of 11, and during my day, there's no way you get tenure at Stanford or any tier 1 school with 11 articles that are not really original. And I would argue that there's no way her committee members did not know about my work because my work did make a big splash. And so whatever she did, there are 3 Supreme Court citations in 2 cases. And so there's no way that they didn't know it. But I believe that because progressives are progressives, my ideas, I was a Democrat at the time, those ideas were seen as conservative, that they needed a Claudine Gay. The people that were concerned about the implications for voting rights, my work was being used in voting rights cases, they needed a high-profile Black person to counter what I was saying. And so I kind of think that she was propped up and people looked the other way, even though they knew what she was doing, they looked the other way. As far as Harvard, should they have fired her? I think that she should have been made to go back and substantially revise her dissertation. And those articles that she presented for tenure that were plagiarized, Stanford was the one that gave her her first tenure. Something should have been done other than ignoring her actions. And that $900,000 a year salary, that's probably her presidential salary that she negotiated to keep. And I heard through the rumor mill, I have no independent verification of this, that she hired lawyers and threatened Harvard and when they were trying to get her to resign. And so she just negotiated a good deal for herself as far as I can see. And all this is based on what I heard through the rumor grapevine.
Okay. We've got, before Claudine Gay, we all knew that higher education is broke. Was broke, is broke, continues to be so. We've got a new president. We've got a bunch of hotshot, intelligent, dynamic, forceful people coming into his cabinet. And we've got Doge, not in the cabinet necessarily, but gonna shake things up and tear things down. There are so many areas of academia or higher education that are a serious problem for our nation, for our culture, and for our children. And where do we start? Where do we start? And can it be restored? Can there be sort of a reformation? Or after Claudine Gay, well, after all of the sit-ins, the Hamasniks, hate fests, on campus, there were a lot of big donors that said, my money's gone unless you fix this. Personally, I don't believe fixing it's going to happen. You'd have to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they would probably faux fix it. It won't really be changing. They'll just quiet it down and hide it better. Can there be an exertion of influence upon the Ivy League itself to reform and literally abandon the Marxism, Islamism, and all of the rest of it? Or is it a separationist kind of a thing, like the Pilgrims? We're separating. And some people are talking about, like, I think it's Neil Ferguson, but of building other universities, other education opportunities, and just leaving. What?
Well, first of all, the surveys show that a majority of students and parents say that a college education is not a good investment. And so if colleges and universities across America want to survive, they have to make changes. And I can tell you that when I started my education, colleges and universities were more of a marketplace of ideas. There were conservative professors, there were liberal professors, there were Marxist professors. Now, for the most part, they're all Marxist professors, or their ideas have just seeped down into every part of the university, including the sciences, medicine, and math. I think that the changes that I saw most dramatically change in the institutions happened during the Obama years. And that was 2012. That was when you began to see the ideas of restorative justice and the critical race theory, going through the educational departments into the K through 12 education. And so some of the things our children have been exposed to, all that began to happen during the Obama administration. I think that the marketplace will impact the future of American education. And all you need is one strong presidential leader of an Ivy League or Tier 1 university to begin to make changes, and the others will fall in line. And I think that if universities are to survive, if they really want to survive and have respect and have people willing to send their offspring to those places, they have to make changes. And I go around the country speaking. I speak at homeschooling conferences. I speak at classical Christian schools, Catholic schools, various places. And sometimes I encounter grandparents and parents who say that the money they saved up for their children's education, that when the child is 18, they're going to give them a choice, that they can take that money and start a business or go to a vocational school, or they can go to college, but they're not feeling like their child has to go to a 4-year college to be successful. So I think these changes that individuals are making, they're looking at colleges and seeing that they destroy the lives of young people. They destroy many children that were raised in strong families. It's a point of shame, as Caitlin Clark kind of illustrated. It's all of a sudden it's white privilege if you had 2 parents and you were raised in a normal family. All of a sudden that's a point of shame. And I would argue that any young person who has 2 parents didn't have to worry about the electricity being turned off or coming home to a cold house. They're privileged, and it has nothing to do with race. But they have made white people so ashamed of themselves and their heritage, and some parents are just not down with that. They don't want that kid to go to college and come back hating God, hating their country, hating everything that we once held dear. And because more parents are making the decision that we're not going to support this with our money, colleges and universities will have to respond.
Do you think it's possible? You talked about destroyed lives, and I look at so many of these revolutionary movements in America, and it's across the world, of course, but in America, and I say, it's not the law of unintended consequences. There's this sort of this grace period, because that's assuming that the people didn't really intend the consequence. but there is a grace period given to radical ideologies, new innovations. I mean, because CRT and wokeism and all this garbage, this has been this has a long pedigree. We were talking about going back to the 60s, 70s and things and before, because of the Marxist roots, of course. What happens that crushes, or just maybe makes me angry more than anything is that the casualties of the allowing this grace period before we finally say, I saw it was Vivek Ramaswamy saying the woke pinnacle has been hit. It's like we're beyond the woke pinnacle. Let's just say that. And so now we're going to be tearing it down. Well, how about all those kids who had their education derailed, who had their thinking derailed? They may take decades to get back to right thinking, who became racists and anti-Semites, who threw away their college education. Instead of listening to authority, they got the art degree that they couldn't do anything with, and it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whatever, there's always bodies. Yeah, and so can we turn around or do something? Because it's not just, let's not teach racism and not sexism, but racism and Jew hatred on campus and anti-Americanism. It's maybe we should go the reverse and teach real history, real civics, real constitutional law. How many generations are we going to lose while we're trying to restore?
I don't know that we're going to lose that many generations, because I'm encouraged by the young people that I meet as I travel. And I think that PragerU videos that have reached billions of people, I have 6. My 6 altogether have reached over 100 million people. And I think that, and I've encountered young people who say they're conservative because they watch one of my videos. And I'm just one of hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have done the short videos. But I believe among young people that I've encountered, some of them I've encountered through Young America's Foundation, Carol Booth's Girls, through Turning Point USA and Blexit. There's so many organizations out there, and there's so many young Black people that are not following the indoctrination. So I don't know that we've lost a whole generation of young people. Some of these people who were raised in normal families actually want to raise their own kids in normal families. And I've run into some people that they may be Jewish, they may come from a long history of secular humanists, and for some reason there's a stirring in their heart. They're seeking God, and they don't always know where it came from. And I think we should be praying for a revival in America. I think that it's taken place. We just had data that book sales are up 1%, but the Bible sales are up 22% this year. 22% of the there's been a 22% increase in the sale of the Bible. Some of these sales are going to young people that are buying their first Bibles, but there's something taking place in America. I think it's good, and that we should be encouraged.
I agree with you wholly, and you remind me of Charlie Kirk talking about this. He will say that we have the most conservative, America First youth in America now than ever before, that it is just exploding. And he is seeing it on campuses, and he's done so much amazing work. Do you have an agenda for Donald J. Trump and the rest of the gang in the White House and in the administration? What would be your top 1, 2, 3, however many you've got of things that need to be dismantled, built up, destroyed, fixed, or funded, whatever it is? What's your agenda, Carol Swain?
I start with Donald J. Trump himself, and I think he is the key. And I believe that, for whatever reason, God raised him up, and that he himself, and I've said this many times in many places, he is the leader. The buck needs to stop with him, and that he has to seek God's wisdom and guidance for himself, because he's surrounded by so many advisors and so many people, and they all can make plausible arguments, but at the end of the day, he has to make a decision. And I think the people that have gone into office with him, if they believe in Judeo-Christian values, and that these Judeo-Christian values, whether uh, whether followed for you know secular reasons or cultural reasons, if they believe these made America a better place, then I think that when they're making decisions, they need to be making decisions that restores some of the traditions, some of the things that distinguished us from the rest of the world. We started following the wrong track when our Supreme Court started citing foreign law to justify decisions that should have been grounded in the U.S. Constitution. That's
Ruth
one
Bader
problem.
Ginsburg, I remember her quote on that. It just still blows my mind.
Well, that's one of the things
Sorry,
that we did that got us off to the wrong track.
Yeah.
And I wish that every person in government, every House member, every new person, if they were forced to sit down and read the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, maybe the Ten Commandments, those are founding documents that were very important, very impactful. If they would just sit down, spend 15, 30 minutes meditating on those documents, it might make a difference, because they're going to be called on to make decisions. And I think one reason our nation is off base is that people don't have core values and principles. If you have core values and principles, you don't have to guess about what to do when a decision needs to be made. You know what needs to be done when you see this decision that needs to be made. There's too much compromise, and I believe that's why we are in the situation we are.
Would you say that Donald J. Trump should eliminate the Department of Education on a federal level?
Oh, yes. And I was disappointed when he appointed a Secretary of Education, because once you put someone in there, even if they think they're going to dismantle it, there's some type of mindset that comes over a person, and they are more likely to end up protecting the institution than dismantling it. I would have felt more comfortable if he had set up some type of infrastructure for a team to go in there to dismantle it, decide, which part goes where. He should dismantle the Department of Education. Whether it will happen during his administration, I don't know that it will happen. So I was disappointed when that particular decision was made.
I think you should be more optimistic about it, because what I do think is you wouldn't want the guy who was in there before to remain until, wouldn't he have remained Biden's Secretary of Education unless he was replaced?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't,
okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so. But you may be right. All I know is that the core mission should be to dismantle that institution.
Down to the ground.
Yes, it really does need to happen.
It will take a congressional vote to eliminate that that department. So what I'm thinking he may be doing is this: just dripping the infrastructure down. You could have 7 people in Podunk, Iowa, or Washington, D.C., and get rid of everybody else, and all you're doing is sending checks to the states or to homeschool or to families for like a voucher program. Are you in favor of his comments that he said that he should be sending the money from the Department of Education, which is billions, and a lot of it is about teaching wokeism and all of that. That's what they use it for, directly to parents to finance the education of their children themselves and make those choices, whether to homeschool, to do voucher schools or whatever, and use that money, if they're not going to a government school institution, to be able to have that money themselves?
Well, I mean, I believe that parents should have choice, and they can decide if they want their kid to be in public school, they want to homeschool, in private school. So they should have choice. I would hate to see a situation where all of a sudden all this money is flowing, and then the private schools hike up their prices. Everyone hikes up the prices so that any money, any money that goes to the parents will end up going, making the education unaffordable again. There has to be some standards of accountability. And I think that even with conservatives, people may be well intentioned, but if you don't monitor people closely, human nature being such as it is, corruption always follows. And so no matter what happens, there has to be guardrails in place, a system to monitor to make sure there are no abuses. And in the inner city schools, one of the problems is they had the wrong people teaching. And Bush's No Child Left Behind, a lot of that was actually working before they dismantled it. I think teachers should be held accountable for the results. And you have people in some of the inner city schools, they don't care whether kids come to school or not. And a lot of the money that's sent, at least here in Nashville, you hear a lot about teachers' pay, increases for teachers' pay, but that money goes to the administrative infrastructure. And it doesn't necessarily find its way into the schools or to the teachers. And so a lot of things that you would think would be addressed doesn't get addressed. So there are many, many problems that need to be addressed with creative thinking, different kinds of people involved in monitoring the funds, the teachers' unions. Get rid of the Department of Education, but then next, the teachers' unions need to go.
They need to go. They needed to go for, I don't know, 100 years. That is a really good thing. Would you be willing to join the Trump administration in any one of the departments as a, maybe not as a senior cabinet member, but as somebody who would be willing to roll up their sleeves and help? Or are you like happy where you are in Tennessee doing what you're doing?
I believe that I'm doing what God has called me to do, but I also believe that God has gifted me with certain talents, and I would be willing to help and consider anything that was offered to me. But I don't see myself moving to D.C., wanting to have a position in anyone's cabinet. But I do believe that President Trump needs people around him who will tell him the truth. And I believe that I'm one of those people, I've always cared. And I think that he has often listened to the wrong voices.
Yes.
And that he needs people like me. I may be a nag. But I also believe that some of the problems that he's had could have been avoided. But people like me, I've tried for 2 years to get 15 minutes of his time, which I didn't get. And so that leads me to, contact various people, send messages. I just really would like to have more access.
Can you tell me if you had 15 minutes of time? You don't have to use 15 minutes because I know that we're going over here. What would be the topic and the bottom line of what you would love to share with him?
I think that the message that I had to share with him a year and a half ago, I have sent it through so many people, and I actually believe that I see fruit in President Trump's demeanor, and I believe he is a far more godlier man today than he was a year ago, and it's not just being shot in the ear. I think that helped. But I do believe that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I believe that God chose him to be a leader and that God deals with leaders. He doesn't deal with all those preachers that may be standing behind him, praying over him. God deals directly with the leader. He may confirm things through other people, but my hope for Donald J. Trump is that he would have his own relationship, because I think that it will make the difference between him being a good president and a great president. I also believe that, like we always say, God loves you, God loves you. I think God really loves Donald Trump. And the way he's wired, he's uniquely wired for this job. And so I don't know what kind of relationship he has, but I think whatever it is, it's closer than it used to be. And my message that I've tried to get to him over the last couple of years is that God wants to hear from him. He is the leader. And there's too many pictures of all these preachers praying over him. It's important for Donald J. Trump to pray himself and to seek wisdom on these weighty issues involving the nations. And I think that that is what's going to make the difference between his being a great president for all times and his, being a good president. And I think God has protected him and be guided. The thing about it is, like, sometimes people don't understand. Like, God's not going to talk to you the way we're talking right now, but he uses impressions. He leads you, to things to read, or someone may say something. God has a way of directing, but you have to put yourself in the position to hear. And but I'm encouraged. I'm very encouraged today, and I don't feel that same need to have access. But if I were ever to feel compelled that I needed to get a message to him, I'd like to believe that I could get a message to him. And I think people like me scare a lot of people that are not quite so spiritual. And I don't know. That's
Well, I think
part of
there's
my
a lot of
story that we
people
don't
that
talk
pray
about.
over him. And one of the things that we should pray is for his own prayer life, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that he needs to hear for himself, and that God's not going to send, and all these people. Like, it's good for
Oh, I
for us
see
to
what you're
pray for
saying.
his
Okay, wait a minute,
protection.
wait. Let me see. Now I'm following a thread. I was trying to do so. No, you're explaining it, but I was just trying to realize. So what you're talking about is, he always has these spiritual advisors. A lot of presidents
Doing
do,
the photo ops.
doing the photo
It's not.
ops.
It's
And
not
what
about photo ops.
And then they're speaking to him, they're speaking to the people
They're
about
praying over
his
him.
they're praying over him, speaking to him about what God wants in his life, prophesying and all that, speaking to people. And the reality is, um, I'm not even going to comment about what
The
they're doing and
reality
not
is that
doing.
God wants to hear. God
Hear
wants to
from him directly.
deal
And
with
God
him.
will
God,
speak in many different ways, because we've all had varying degrees and different ways that God has spoken to us. And that is what is going to make him the greatest president, is if he's
well, do you
on
know
his
something
knees.
else?
Hmm.
Anyone who's read the Bible knows that sometimes God, when he's speaking to a leader, he will have you do something that's not going to make sense to anyone else around you.
Hmm.
And so everyone else is going to say, that's not what you're supposed to do. Well, you have
Well,
to
that sounds like Donald
know.
Trump all the time.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And so,
you
you
got
know
to be
something?
listening to God. You have to,
And,
and you have
and,
to have that relationship where you recognize that he's speaking to you, or having you do the thing that nobody else thinks. It sounds crazy. He just invited Xi to his inauguration, and everybody's like, Xi's coming to your
well,
inauguration.
you know something
I
too? And
love,
I've never had a problem with the fact that he thought he could have a good relationship with Putin because, you're called to be leaders. We're called to communicate with people. And so there are lots of things that his instincts may be good instincts. Sometimes people have given him bad advice. But today, I can truly say that I do believe that Donald Trump is a changed man. And as the Christian journey, we're never there. We never get there. We always works in progress. But I am so encouraged by everything that I've seen. But I have felt for a long time that sometimes the people around him may tell him what they think he wants to hear, but that it's important that he have around him some truth speakers, and that he knows that it's not about the people who pray over him. There's no substitute for him praying for himself. For God wants to hear his voice. And that's the message that I felt like the Lord uh, put on my heart to tell him to go back.
you're
And he
not
wants to
the
humble
first
himself too.
person. Yeah, I have heard from more than one person saying almost just exactly what you said,
Well,
that
good.
they wanted to speak to Donald John Trump, because they want him to pray and to establish that two-way communication with the Lord, sort of setting aside advisors in the spiritual realm and really Be with the Lord alone with your Bible, sitting on a couch or an easy chair, and spend a little time
Mhm.
there. Um, do you pray for Donald Trump?
I do pray for him, and I feel connected to him. Uh, and I know that his election has been a miracle, and that God loves him. And like all these people, oh, he did this, he did that 20 years ago. They don't understand that Christianity is a come as you are religion, and it's that God doesn't care what you did. He picks the worst of the worst. He picks people that you would never think that he would choose. He doesn't pick people that are perfect or they think they're perfect. There's nowhere in the Bible that God has ever operated that way.
No, absolutely not. And when I see Christian leaders that were the never Trumpers because of his tweets and things like that, it's obviously some things in his background, in his history. I think, really, if somebody came to your church and told you these things, would you say, "Oh,